Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Today is Thursday, and I can thankfully say that life is finally starting to settle down just a little bit, you guys. We finally finished all of the cleaning and packing and sorting and organizing at the house. We are now officially moved into our travel trailer for the next, I don't know, foreseeable future anyway. And now it's just a matter of waiting. But I can tell you the beginning of this week was a little bit hectic and I got kind of behind. Lack of sleep was not helpful. And unfortunately, I just wasn't able to pull everything together for yesterday. So here I am, a little more fresh faced today, finishing up my video and getting it out to you guys. So for today's video, I did 3 thrift flips. I pulled some items out of my stash and gave them very neutral makeovers. I wanted some things that I could use not only in my fall decor, but also into Christmas and beyond that would just kind of play in the background and accent some other things with more color as the seasons change. So that's what I concentrated on for today, was just kind of a neutral palette and some beautiful neutral decor. So I hope you like what I came up with, and without further ado, let's get to today's video. My first project for today is this beautiful pillar holder that I picked up quite a while ago. It's been in my stash for some time, and I knew I wanted to do something very neutral with it. I sell quite a few neutrally painted candle holders out of my shop, and so for this one I picked DIY's Faded Burlap, which is this beautiful kind of light taupey brown. It's just a wonderful neutral, and I am going over this candle holder with 2 good coats of the Faded Burlap. Now, I love pillar holders in my decor. I use them a lot in my displays, not for candles necessarily, but more for decor. These make such great risers, and I thought this one in particular, since it was so wide on top, would be a perfect riser. Now, if you've never used DIY paint before, it is relatively thick paint. It is very highly pigmented, so I only needed 2 coats for this pillar holder. But I am not a huge fan of brushstroke marks on my pieces, so I always keep a mister bottle handy. DIY paint is also water-based, so you can mist it as you go, and that will help alleviate a few of those brushstroke marks. Once my piece was completely dry again after that second coat of paint, it was time to seal it. DIY paint is also porous and can be reactivated with water, so you definitely want to seal it. For this, I chose DIY's white wax to kind of highlight some of the details in this candle holder, and also honestly bring out some of those brushstroke marks to make them feel a little bit like texture on this piece. I'm just using my soft bristle brush to apply that wax, and then using a dry shop towel to wipe back the excess really carefully and just with a very light touch. And once I'm finished with that, this pillar holder is done. I love the soft neutral look of this pillar holder, and it will be a great addition to my fall and my upcoming Christmas displays. For my second project, I decided to grab these 2 plaques out of my stash. Now, I have been looking at these for the longest time and trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do with them. And I thought today's video, trying to be very neutral, would be a perfect opportunity to do something with them that would make them usable in all of my seasonal displays. So I am just painting these with 2 good coats of DIY's weathered wood. I love the color weathered wood. I think it is such a beautiful dark neutral. It's got some gray and a little bit of brown in it, and it goes with just about anything. So again, once I'm finished with these pieces, they will be perfect not only for fall, but right into Christmas and beyond. So I'm going over these again with 2 good coats of weathered wood. I had to do a second coat mainly because these guys were so heavily detailed that I missed a couple spots my first go around. So I just went ahead and did 2 full coats of the paint. And here again, you'll see me use my mister bottle to help thin the paint a little bit, not only to spread it out and alleviate the brushstroke marks, but in this case, to help me be able to work it down into some of those thicker details. Now, my favorite way to seal a piece that's been painted with weathered wood is with DIY's white wax. I love the combination of the white wax and the weathered wood paint, and this just brings out so much detail in these beautiful little plaques. Now, I know when I use darker waxes, I like to go over my piece first with a coat of clear wax, and that helps act as like a barrier between your colored wax and your piece, and especially with those darker waxes, helps them look a little less muddy and caked on. The exception for me is always the white wax. I normally just go directly onto my piece with white wax. I find it's pretty easy to move around on its own, and I just like the look of it better just directly over my paint. Then I grab my dry shop towel, and this is where the magic really kind of starts to happen when you start wiping back some of that excess wax, and it really deepens that paint up and really pops out all of that beautiful detail. I did decide, even though I'm going for a very neutral palette with this video, that I wanted a little bit of shimmer and shine with these. They are going to be going into my fall decor, but they'll probably still be here when I go ahead and redecorate for Christmas. And if you've been watching me a while, you know I like gold for Christmas. So I grabbed my Eternal Gold Decor Wax by Redesign with Prima, and I just put a little bit on my fingertip and added that to some of the higher details on these plaques. I didn't overload them. I didn't want them to be all shimmery and gold. I just wanted a nice little accent to some of the details on these. I think this was the perfect final touch for these plaques. I love how they turned out, and I really hope you guys do too. My third and final project is one that was inspired by a YouTube video I saw by Paint Couture Paints, where they upcycled a little shutter similar to mine using Roycycled Treasures decoupage paper. And I really loved the concept, so I grabbed this one that I've had in my stash for ages now and washed it off in my sink and began painting it. Now, originally I had decided, since I was going to be putting decoupage paper over it, to use white linen by DIY, which is one of the cottage colors that has a built-in sealer, and it's pretty easy to lay down decoupage paper over it because you don't have to worry about the paint itself reactivating with the medium and leaching into your paper. And so that was my original plan. But once I had a coat of it down, I began thinking of how I was going to get the sides and everything else to mesh up with that stark white paint. So I ended up switching directions, and rather than going with the white linen under the decoupage paper and then trying to be super careful about cutting in another color, I just decided to go over the entire piece with Crinoline, which is this beautiful off-white by DIY. And I did end up, since it was black to begin with, going over the entire piece with 3 coats of the Crinoline paint. Now I wanted to stick to a neutral color palette, so originally I had planned on using the brand new Christmas decoupage paper called Christmas Journal by Roycycled Treasures. And unfortunately, since it ran landscape rather than portrait, and I really couldn't figure out a way to make it cohesive by cutting it and kind of pasting it together, I decided instead to go to my stash and find a different paper. And the paper that I ended up choosing is called Distressed Grungy Floral. It's also by Roycycled Treasures. And I measured the inside of my shutter and cut off a piece to match. Then I began laying my paper onto my shutter. I started at the very bottom, laying a strip of the liquid patina by DIY over that very first shutter, and then very carefully putting my paper down so that I knew everything was straight and even, and then I went over it with another coat of the liquid patina. Then I moved my way up to the second shutter, and in the video that I watched, they used the tip of their paintbrush to kind of very carefully push the paper down into that crevice between the shutters just a little bit. So that is what I'm trying to mimic here as I work my way up the shutter. Just kind of very gently pushing the paper down into that crack and then adhering it to the shutter. This process definitely took me some time. I tried to go slow and carefully so as not to rip my paper. Now, I didn't have quite enough to finish all of the shutter pieces, so I did end up having to cut another strip of the paper, and I just started on the second to the last shutter, and same procedure, just laid my liquid patina down and took my new strip of paper and put it over it, and then very carefully went over it with another coat of the liquid patina. Luckily, the pattern of this paper worked really well for this, and you can't even tell the difference at the top. Once I was finally finished applying my paper, I let this piece sit and dry completely before I moved on to the next step. Now I needed to cut all of my slats out, so I'm just using a box cutter, and I'm very carefully going at the bottom of each one of the rungs and slicing that paper. This was a little bit of a tricky procedure, and I'm glad I waited for the paper to be completely dry before I attempted this. And then once I was done with that, I had to remove the excess paper from the bottom, and then it was just a matter of laying that extra paper down onto my slats. So I had to use my paintbrush and kind of shove that up in between the slats to pick up that extra little tab of paper, and then I would lay down a little bit more liquid patina over it and underneath it and lay it back down and just kind of paint it into place. It was kind of a tricky little situation, but I just took my time and worked on each shutter individually until I had my piece completely finished. Once it was completely dry again, it was time to seal the rest of my shutter. For that, I started with a coat of DIY's clear wax, and I'm applying that not only to the painted portion of the shutter, but also over the decoupage paper as well. I'm just applying that with my soft bristle brush, making sure to get in all the little nooks and crannies, and then using a dry shop towel to very carefully wipe back the excess wax. Once that was done, I decided to add a little bit more depth and dimension, particularly to this little applique that was at the top of the shutter. I would add some dark wax. So I grabbed out a little brush and I put dark wax over the applique and then wiped back the excess. And then I went along the sides of the shutter and added some dark wax into the grooves between the shutters and also just to the very edges of the decoupage paper on both sides. I just wanted to add a little bit more depth and dimension to this piece. And then once I was done with all the little grooves, I went ahead and dipped my brush into some mineral spirits and then added those to my dark wax to make kind of a liquidy glaze. And then I went over the rest of the shutter with that. I find that this kind of deepens and darkens the paint without using the full force of the dark wax, which can sometimes give you a little bit of a streaky finish. Once I'd gone over the entire rest of the shutter with the, I'll call it a glaze for lack of a better word, and wiping back the excess, I went ahead and grabbed out my gold decor wax again and just added a touch of that to the applique at the top of the shutter. I think this was the perfect finishing touch for this. I absolutely love how it came out. I hope you guys do too. For today, you guys. I hope you liked my neutral projects and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would really love it if you would subscribe to my channel and just hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then don't forget to drop a comment below and let me know what you thought of my projects for today. Just a reminder, the paint and products you saw me use today can be purchased through me and my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. It's listed below in the description box as well. I carry DIY paint and products as well as Sweet Pickins milk paint and products, Roycycled Treasures decoupage papers, which I just got in some of the brand new Christmas release. I was really hoping to use the Christmas journal, but I swear to you at some point I will get a chance. And I also carry Redesign with Prima products. So check those out online. And let's see, for Saturday's video, it's probably going to be relatively simple because as you can probably guess, I am just going to be starting on it today. So I will be grabbing a few more items out of my stash and working on those for you for Saturday. Anyway, until then, I hope you have a fantastic, what is it today? Today's Wednesday or Thursday. So rest of your week and the beginning of the weekend, and I will see you back here on Saturday. Thank you so much for being here, you guys. I so appreciate it. And I'll see you then. Bye.